The air in the ballroom was thick with champagne bubbles, perfume and self-importance. Every chandelier sparkled like it knew who was rich enough to be beneath it. Cameras flashed. Deals were sealed with practiced smiles. The annual Women Who Lead Summit was in full swing, an event that celebrated powerful women breaking ceilings, or pretending to. At the center of it all was Victoria Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Tech, a billion-dollar AI company that turned data into gold. She was the kind of woman magazines wrote entire issues about. Sharp, elegant, unshakable. Her red dress was the color of ambition, her diamond necklace a trophy of every man she had outsmarted. "Victoria, darling. Over here," called a journalist, flashing a camera as Victoria's smile switched on like a light bulb. He loved these nights. They were her theater, her proof that she had risen from nothing to reign over everything. Then came the moment that would change everything. As Victoria stepped off the stage after receiving her Innovator of the Year award, a young woman approached her, slim, dark curls and a confidence that seemed too unseasoned for the room. Her badge read Maria Alvarez, CEO Green Rise Energy. "Senora Vale," Maria said warmly, extending her hand, "congratulations. Your speech was inspiring. I'd love to collaborate with you on a sustainability partnership we've been developing." Victoria barely glanced at the hand. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then a dismissive smirk. "I'm afraid we don't do charity partnerships," Victoria replied coolly, walking past without a handshake. Cameras didn't catch the exact moment, but plenty of eyes did. The silence after was louder than applause. Maria's smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. She withdrew her hand, nodded politely and simply said, "Noted." By the next morning #Handgate was trending. Someone had caught the tail end of the exchange. Victoria walking away, Maria's hand hanging midair. The clip went viral overnight. Power CEO snubs Latina entrepreneur. Diversity event irony. Billionaire refuses a handshake. Cold, cruel corporate queen. At first Victoria laughed it off. "Let them talk," she told her assistant, sipping her espresso. "Outrage dies in 24 hours. But it didn't. By noon, journalists were digging into Vale Tech's hiring record. An ocean of male executives and a glaring absence of minority leadership. Former employees began posting stories online about toxic work culture, favoritism, and condescension from the top. And Maria? She stayed silent. That silence was louder than anything Victoria could say. By day's end, a reporter called asking for comment. "Miss Vale, Green Rise just announced a major partnership with two of your biggest competitors. Any thoughts?" Victoria blinked. "Who?" "Maria Alvarez. The woman whose hand you refused." The journalist's tone carried something sharp, almost poetic. Victoria ended the call. Her jaw tightened. Her empire had weathered bad press before, but this was different. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her symbol. The world she had built her name in, the public eye, was turning on her. "Get PR on this," she ordered. Now. But PR couldn't fix what pride had already shattered. By the next morning her company's stock began to wobble. Social media turned into a battlefield. Investors wanted answers. And still Maria hadn't said a single word publicly. That silence started to feel like judgment. And for the first time in years Victoria felt something she hadn't felt since her first day in business. Fear. That night she scrolled through her phone, watching video clips dissecting her every move. One talk show replayed the handshake moment in slow motion. "She looked at her hand like it was beneath her," one guest said. "That's the problem with old money in new industries." Victoria slammed her phone down. "Old money? I earned everything I have." But that was the cruel irony. Perception didn't care about truth. It only cared about drama. And drama had found its new villain. Meanwhile, in a modest office on the other side of the city, Maria sat surrounded by a small team of engineers. The air was electric. "Tesla called this morning," her assistant said, eyes wide. "They want to license our renewable grid tech." Maria smiled faintly. "Let's make sure it works before we brag about it." But deep down she knew, the stars had shifted overnight. That simple moment of rejection had turned her into a symbol. Not because she wanted revenge, but because people saw dignity in the way she handled it. Where Victoria's silence screamed entitlement, Maria's silence whispered strength. 3 days later, the cracks in Vailtech widened. One sponsor withdrew, then another. Stock price down 12%. Her CFO called in sick to avoid press conferences. And then came the board meeting. Victoria entered the room in her usual power stance, red blazer, high heels clicking like gunfire. But the energy had changed. Every man at the table avoided eye contact. Every woman looked disappointed. "Let's address the elephant in the room," her CEO began. "The brand is toxic right now. Investors are nervous. We've lost 3 major contracts." Victoria waved a manicured hand. "We'll recover. It's a media storm, nothing more." Then came the dagger. "Greenrise just announced a merger with Nexitech," said her CFO. "They're developing a new AI energy model. Same sector as ours. Investors are moving their capital." Victoria's throat tightened. Nexitech was her fiercest rival. And Maria Alvarez, the woman she had dismissed like an afterthought, had just joined them. Later that evening, Victoria sat alone in her penthouse, staring out over the glittering skyline that had once looked like hers. Every light outside seemed to mock her. She replayed that moment over and over again in her head. The handshake she didn't take. She could almost see it now, like a scene in slow motion. Maria's eyes, warm, genuine, open. And her own, cold, closed, guarded. She had built an empire on control. But in trying to control every interaction, she had lost the one thing she couldn't buy back: respect. And it was slipping through her fingers like sand. The next morning, the headlines hit harder than coffee. Vailtech under federal investigation for data violations. Stock plummets 38% overnight. CEO Victoria Vale steps down amid scandal. Victoria read every line in disbelief. Her empire wasn't falling, it was collapsing. But the worst headline wasn't about money. It was about meaning. Victoria Vale, the woman who refused to shake the future's hand. For the first time in her life, she cried. Not for the company. Not for the money. But because she finally understood. Sometimes the smallest moments, the ones you think mean nothing, are the ones that rewrite your entire life. And she had rewritten hers with one refusal. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, the empire of Victoria Vale was already in free fall. The woman who had once graced magazine covers now found her face plastered on tabloids next to the words, "Disgraced CEO," and "Corporate Queen Toppled." It wasn't just bad press anymore. It was survival. Vailtech's board of directors called for an emergency session at 6 a.m. The tone was brutal. "Victoria," began Harold Singh, her oldest ally, voice shaking, "we have no choice. Investors are withdrawing faster than we can reassure them. The FTC subpoena arrived an hour ago." Victoria stared blankly at the long mahogany table. The same table where she'd once toasted billion-dollar deals now felt like a witness stand. "So that's it?" she asked softly. "You're ousting me?" "Not ousting," Harold said carefully. "Protecting the company." She laughed bitterly. "From me." The silence confirmed it. Her resignation was drafted and ready. All she had to do was sign. Her hand trembled as the pen touched paper, and for the first time she felt the weight of what she had built, what she had become. A machine. All edges. No warmth. As she left the glass tower for the last time, a crowd of reporters swarmed like vultures. "Ms. Vale, any comment on Greenrise's merger? Do you regret your actions at the summit? Did discrimination play a role in your leadership style?" Each question was a bullet, and she had no armor left. She pushed through, lips tight, bodyguard shielding her, but one voice cut through the noise. "Victoria." She turned. Standing a few feet away was Maria Alvarez, poised, calm, wearing a navy blue suit that screamed quiet power. She wasn't there to gloat. Her eyes carried no triumph, only empathy. For a second the chaos around them dimmed. "Ms. Vale," Maria said gently, "you built something incredible. Maybe it's time to build something different." Victoria blinked. "You're here to lecture me now?" Maria shook her head. "No. I'm here because I know what it's like to be invisible. And because everyone deserves a second chance. Even the ones who refuse to shake your hand." The words stung because they were kind. And kindness was something Victoria hadn't felt in months. She said nothing. Just nodded faintly and slipped into her car. Days bled into weeks. The fall of Vailtech became a public case study in hubris. Documentaries dissected her leadership. Influencers made reaction videos. Universities used her as a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Maria Alvarez's name lit up headlines. The Latina CEO who redefined clean tech. Green Rise Energy's stock soared. Investors lined up to fund her vision for sustainable AI grids. The woman who had once been brushed aside was now rewriting the industry, and doing it with grace. Victoria watched from her penthouse, her once lavish space now hollow. The marble floors echoed when she walked. Her phone barely rang anymore. Her assistant quit. Her PR team moved on. For years she had told herself that emotions were liabilities, that empathy made leaders weak. But now, alone in a fortress of glass and silence, she began to see what power without compassion looked like. Barren. One evening she went for a walk in Central Park. No makeup. No entourage. Just her thoughts. It was cold, early November, and leaves drifted like fading memories. She passed a group of young girls laughing with notebooks in hand, students from a business program. She overheard one say, "Did you read about that Vail Tech woman? Crazy how fast she lost everything." The other replied, "Yeah. But the Maria Alvarez story? That's goals. She's like the anti-Vail." Victoria stopped walking. She didn't resent the words. She understood them. For the first time she saw herself not as a victim, but as the architect of her downfall. That night she poured herself a glass of wine and opened her old laptop, the same one she'd used in her 20s when she first dreamed of building something meaningful. The login screen still showed her old motto, "No mercy. No mistakes." She stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. In its place she typed, "Listen first." A week later she sent an email to Maria Alvarez. Subject: "A conversation if you'll allow it. Maria, I don't expect forgiveness. But I'd like to understand. You've built something that feels alive. I built something efficient but hollow. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. Not for business, just for truth. Victoria." She didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later it came. From Maria Alvarez. Subject: "A conversation if you'll allow it. Victoria, I believe growth comes from discomfort. Meet me Friday at Café Luz, 3 p.m. No cameras. Just 2 women." Friday came. The cafe was small, bright, filled with the smell of espresso and cinnamon. Victoria arrived early, nervous in a way she hadn't felt in decades. Maria entered 10 minutes later, radiant yet simple. She ordered coffee, smiled politely, and sat across from her. For a while neither spoke. Then Victoria said quietly, "That night, I thought I was protecting my image. I didn't realize I was destroying my humanity." Maria stirred her coffee. "We all learn differently. Some through kindness. Others through loss." Victoria nodded. "I've had enough loss to fill a lifetime." Maria leaned forward slightly. "Then maybe you're ready to build something better. Something human." Victoria looked up, eyes tired but sincere. "Would you help me understand what that looks like?" Maria smiled. "Start small. Start with a handshake." Victoria froze, then slowly extended her hand. This time Maria took it. No cameras. No reporters. Just 2 women, one humbled, one wise, sharing the moment that could have rewritten history had it come sooner. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Victoria didn't vanish into exile like fallen CEOs often do. Instead, she started the Vail Foundation, a non-profit mentorship program for underrepresented women in tech. She spoke at universities, not as the flawless mogul but as the woman who fell. Her story became less about failure and more about awakening. And every time she was introduced at events, she'd smile and say, "You know, I used to be the woman who refused a handshake. Now I'm the one extending it first." The media tried to reignite the rivalry, but Maria refused to play along. When asked about Victoria in an interview, she said simply, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only thing that makes strength worth having." Months later, at another tech summit, both women crossed paths again, this time on stage side by side. Victoria gave her speech last. "I used to think leadership was about control," she said to a silent crowd. "Now I know it's about connection. The empire I lost taught me more than the empire I built." The audience rose in applause. And as she stepped down, she saw Maria in the front row, clapping, smiling. Victoria smiled back, And this time when their hands met, it wasn't just a handshake. It was redemption. The next year didn't bring headlines, it brought healing. For once, Victoria Vale wasn't chasing interviews, stock prices, or spotlight moments. She spent her mornings mentoring young women from underfunded schools and her evenings reading books she'd never had time for. Her life had slowed down enough for her to hear herself think again. Every Friday she met with her team at the Vale Foundation, a small office filled with laughter, clumsy interns, and the smell of coffee instead of cologne and competition. They worked out of a shared workspace, not a skyscraper. No glass walls, no bodyguards, just shared desks and stories. And she was happy. For the first time in her life, truly happy. One morning, a young girl from her mentorship program approached her after a workshop. She was 16, shy, and spoke with a quiet accent that reminded Victoria of her own mother's. "Miss Vale," the girl said, clutching a folder, "I just wanted to say, thank you. Everyone online talks about how you fell. But I think what you did after, that's what really matters." Victoria smiled. "Thank you, Elena. Falling isn't failure. It's proof that you tried to fly." The girl beamed and left, but those words stayed with Victoria all day. Guess she meant them. Later that week she was invited to a global innovation conference in Lisbon. Ironically, the same kind of event that once fed her ego. At first she refused. The stage didn't feel like home anymore. But then came the email from the organizer. "Maria Alvarez personally requested that you join the panel." Victoria hesitated, then agreed. Lisbon was alive with music and warmth when she arrived. The ocean breeze carried salt and chatter. The conference hall was sleek, modern, but not intimidating, filled with real innovators, not corporate facades. When she walked on stage beside Maria Alvarez, the applause felt genuine. Not the forced kind from boardrooms, but the human kind. They sat side by side before an audience of thousands. The moderator smiled. "Ms. Vale, Ms. Alvarez, a year ago you two represented two sides of an unforgettable moment. Today you stand here together. What changed?" Victoria took a deep breath. "Perspective," she said simply. "I used to think success meant being first, best, unstoppable. But real success is being reachable. I learned that from Maria." The crowd murmured approvingly. Maria leaned toward the mic. "And I learned from Victoria that everyone deserves space to grow. Even people who hurt us. We don't change the world by canceling. It changes when we teach." Applause thundered through the hall. The two women looked at each other, and this time their handshake wasn't symbolic. It was sisterly. After the panel, as they walked outside into the golden Lisbon sun, Maria turned to Victoria. "You know," she said, "I think that moment, our moment, happened for a reason." Victoria chuckled. "To humble me. To humanize you," Maria corrected. "And to remind everyone watching that empathy still wins." Victoria smiled softly. "You've always been wiser than your years." Maria shrugged. "Wisdom's just the reward for pain you didn't deserve." That evening the two shared dinner at a seaside restaurant. No assistants. No cameras. Just wine, seafood, and laughter. "You ever think about going back to business?" Maria asked, sipping her drink. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" Maria laughed. "Maybe not a job, but a project." She leaned forward. Greenrise is launching a mentorship branch, Empower Tech. It's designed to help immigrant women enter the tech field. I want you to co-chair it with me. Victoria blinked, surprised. "After everything?" Maria nodded. "Because of everything." For a long moment Victoria just stared at her. Then slowly her lips curved into a smile that reached her eyes. "You really do believe in second chances, don't you?" "I believe in earned ones," Maria said. They clinked glasses, sealing something far greater than a business deal. Months passed and Empower Tech became a force of change. Together, Maria and Victoria raised millions for scholarships, funded rural coding programs, and opened doors for women who had been told they didn't belong. Photos of the two working side by side filled tech magazines. Not as rivals. Not as symbols of scandal. But as partners in purpose. And though some cynics still whispered about the handshake scandal, most people saw it for what it was. The beginning of a revolution in leadership. One evening, after a long day at Empower Tech's new headquarters in Austin, Victoria and Maria sat on the rooftop terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and coral. "You know," Victoria said, A year ago I would have been sitting in some skyscraper pretending I owned the sunset. Maria smiled. Now you just enjoy it. Victoria nodded. That's enough. They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Finally, Maria said softly, "Do you ever regret it?" That night. Victoria thought for a long moment. Every day. But I'm also grateful for it. Because without that mistake I'd still be blind. That refusal wasn't my fall. It was my awakening. Maria reached over and placed her hand gently on Victoria's. Then it was worth it. Later that night, Victoria returned to her apartment. A modest two-bedroom with plants and books and sunlight. Her old penthouse had been sold long ago. She didn't miss it. She poured herself tea, opened her laptop, and began writing a letter she'd been meaning to draft for months. To the woman I used to be. You thought you needed to be feared to be respected. You believed kindness was weakness. You mistook arrogance for power. You were wrong. You built an empire of glass, beautiful, cold, fragile, and when it shattered you finally touched the ground again. I'm proud of you for falling. Because only by falling did you remember how to stand. Victoria. She hit save and sat back, smiling faintly through tears. Outside her window, city lights shimmered, not as trophies but as reminders. Every flicker represented someone starting over just like her. The next morning, she woke to an email notification. Subject: Forbes feature, "The Women Who Rebuilt Leadership." Dear Ms. Vale, we're publishing a story on how your partnership with Maria Alvarez redefined empathy in business. We'd love to feature you both on our cover. The theme is Grace After Power. Forbes editorial team. Victoria laughed softly. She didn't need a cover anymore. But this one felt earned. She forwarded the email to Maria with a single line. From handshake to headline. Life's poetic, isn't it? Maria replied moments later. Only if you're humble enough to see the poetry. When the magazine finally hit stands, the cover didn't show two moguls or rivals. It showed two women smiling, their hands clasped. No jewelry. No luxury. Just light. Beneath their photo the headline read, "She refused a hand once, now she extends it to the world." Victoria kept a single copy framed in her new office. Not as a reminder of shame but of grace. And whenever a young woman entered her mentorship program with doubts in her eyes, she'd point to it and say, "Remember, your worst moment can still become your best story if you're brave enough to face it." Then she'd reach out her hand. Every time they took it,